Welcome to the Butterfly Chamber with J.R. The thoughts and views expressed on this episode of the Butterfly Chamber does not reflect the views of any organization with which the hosts or guests may be affiliated with.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Butterfly Chamber. I am J.R. McDonald, and this is the place where you can kick off your shoes and relax your feet and partyo down. Oh, y'all know that song. Y'all know it. Don't do that. But this is a great space where you can chat with friends. You can get an opportunity to, meet that cousin, that relative that swoops into town. And I call them my guests, but they're family. So that family member that comes in and just gets some of the Kool-Aid, and we just talk on the porch. And I am looking forward to sharing some of my guests that I have been inspired by, that I have been influenced by in so many ways with all of you. The Butterfly Chamber is a space where we embrace our cocoon. There is so much that happens in dark spaces that develops in the darkness that allows us to become who we are and hopefully manifest into that butterfly that we were destined to be. And this is that space for us to embrace what are we learning, what are we doing, and how are we growing in the process. So today on episode 2, we are connecting in with someone that I have known for 12 years. As long as I've been in New York City, I have known this person. I have been inspired from this leader, met them with the New York Urban League and got connected into the movement. And they are about that life, right? And I'm saying this because this is also a plug into their book. And they are empowering leaders. I'm going to the LinkedIn now, but they're empowering leaders through equity and inclusion education, professional coaching, and speaking. But this is one of the people, these are one of the peoples that you're going to see on this podcast that's not only talking the talk, but walking the walk. And it's not performative. So I am going to introduce to you, because I shared a little bit about this person, but I also know that what comes after I am is so important. So I'm going to let them have some time to share about themselves. But I introduce to all of you and welcome to the porch, to the chamber, Rashib Thomas.
Hello. Thank you, James, for such a powerful introduction and loving introduction. And I'm so glad to be on the porch, right? Pull up my drink, kick my shoes off, and just and watch the community go by. And so, again, thank you for that introduction. Like you said, everything after I am. So you said my name is Rashib Thomas. That's who I am. And I am a trusting, authentic, and responsible leader. The community knows me as helping people discover information they can use. And like you said, through diversity, equity, and inclusion education, also human resources consulting, and through professional and executive coaching. And I'm the author of Bout That Life, Leadership Lessons for the Urban Professional, where I took my many years in human resources in client-facing, profit-driven organizations, and I bottled it up in a book, and then I now get a chance to speak that and talk it to other people and to organizations, communities, and groups. And from my point of view, and from what I've learned as a Black man in America, in corporate America. And so I'm so glad that we get a chance to have a conversation today and just do it in a way that just feels good, because my shoes are off. Why not?
Yes. Thank you so much, and for everything that you're doing. So today we are going to lean in because we both work in many spaces where we're empowering others, and we are in the movement working, but also we're doing diversity, equity, inclusion work. And, mental health is important. Most recently this month, we've celebrated National Mental Health Month. And what we want to talk about today is, how are you navigating your mental health as a professional? So I'm going to tell you a study that has come out from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill that found that Black students and those in the Black community have the highest rates of depression. So other research has shown that they often do not get the mental health they need. only 25% of Black students reported seeking out psychological treatment, compared with nearly 45% of white students. So according to this Journal of the Adolescent Health, so we want to make sure we quote our sources. One of the greatest barriers of students of color is accessing these services is the lack of diverse counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists on college campuses. Does this, when you hear this, Rashib, does this seem like something that's far-fetched? Is this something like, hey, I've been knew this is out there? What are your thoughts when you hear this?
Wow, what a great statistic to share to the group and to share to your listeners, because I absolutely think this is very key and critical. Because what comes up for me, James, as you mentioned that statistic, is the different layers to us as Black professionals or as Black people seeking mental health services. And like you said, adolescents on college campuses. I actually write a story in my book about having an issue. So I also identify as a gay man, right? And during my collegiate years or undergraduate years, I was discovering that, right? Yeah. And in such a way that I actually had a situation with another student that you would call it harassment by today's standards. But back then it was because I was the effeminate person, someone else in my community had the right to harass me or ridicule me or bully me because they were trying to figure out what I was up to when I didn't even know what I was up to, right? And so what I was struggling with, and when you talk about what adolescents go through is, you know what, before they even got into college, what were the messages that did they receive at home? Because I know you and I are going to talk about our faith and our religion, right? But I received so many messages that I was a walking abomination, right? And so there were many areas in my life that I didn't feel I deserved support because I was doing the wrong thing, quote unquote. But back to when I was in college and the situation with being harassed, I actually realized I needed help, and I needed help twofold. I needed this other student to stop harassing me, but then I also wanted to discover and acknowledge. That was the first time in my life that I wanted to acknowledge that, okay, maybe I could be gay, right? I think I am gay. So what does that mean? And do you know, James, I said I need some counseling. I walked to the campus counseling center and I got spooked. And what I mean by that is some of the counselors were walking back into the campus counseling center, and one of them was African American, or he was a Black man. And he was the last person walking in, and he was holding the door. And I was about to walk up to the door. And even I saw him peripherally or so, but I was trying to keep the momentum and muster the strength to keep walking, because I was going to admit to other people that, yes, I am gay, right? And at the same time, what does that mean? And when I saw him, and because he was Black, and because my connections to the community and the church and all these different things, and he was also an advisor for fraternity. Yeah. Because I knew he was connected to so many people, I got scared. And I turned around. And the funny thing is, I remember him recognizing that I was faltering in that moment, and him wanting to reach out, or he was about to say something. And whatever I did, I know I sped up and walked quicker. And us both being from Louisiana, I actually walked across the bayou.
I know that's right.
Quicker back to my dorm. So when I think about mental health and us not having access, I wonder what also all of the barriers, because I was also raised in a home that if it wasn't in the Bible, you shouldn't be going to see no person that's going to shrink your head. Correct. That's what I was told. And so I didn't know the value of it. And not knowing, so I didn't even know to look for those services. I think by the time I did in the moment, what I just described, due to the harassment situation, I don't know where I got. Maybe someone told me you should go to the campus counseling center, but up until then, I used to just try to pray things away. And prayer, faith without works is dead. So the works becomes getting the mental health counseling. And there's a lot of disinformation out there. And for people to get access to mental health, which I'm glad we're having these conversations now, like especially during the month of mental health awareness, is that it's finally reaching into minority communities or communities, marginalized communities that have been left out of the conversation
Right.
because they didn't have the luxury to seek mental health services because they were so busy in survival mode.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the things that we would hear too is that's for them.
That's for them, right?
That's, oh, I'm not crazy. I don't need no mental health. What you talking about? You better go to Jesus. Like you would
Right.
hear those things. So you were, sometimes when I look at, and that's why I read that statistic for us today, because a lot of the things that we are experiencing as professionals or middle-aged men, Black men, was communicated to us as adolescents, and so
Yes.
sometimes when we have to unpack where we are in this moment, we have to go back
Mm-hmm.
years to see, how did I get here? Why do I think the way that I do? Why do I receive information in this manner? And sometimes it brings you back to the way that you were matured, the way that you were actually taught by your family, Christianity or whatever your religion may be. So sometimes, and also your culture. So there are many things that, as it relates to mental health, the Black community, we find that we are coming aboard later,
Yeah.
and I applaud some of our younger, Generation Z, because they're doing this now. They're doing it the right way. They're talking about it. So they're actually getting out there, and that's important.
And let me jump in and say thank you for that. And also, the system was designed to keep us from access, or to keep us as far away from access as we can. We know that we've also had bad experiences historically with not just mental health, but the medical professionals, right? We were experimented on. We were given hysterectomies without our permission. Our cells were taken from us. We were given chemicals or tested on, and all of these different things without our permission. So another layer of that is that, yes, we received messaging in our house that if it wasn't in the Bible or we couldn't pray it away, we shouldn't do it. But then also that's for them. Let's not trust them because meaning dominant culture in America, meaning white people, because they are going to hurt us and they're going to misuse us and misuse our bodies for someone else's benefit, for their benefit, for some enterprise or whatnot. And so that's also very true in our culture. And so now, and that's why it's also important. You can go to any mental health counselor you want, but it's also very amazing when you can match and partner with someone that looks like you. That's why representation matters, because 9.5 times out of 10, they've walked the shoes you've walked. And so you can connect with them on that level.
Yes, yes. And also there was something that you said too about dominant culture. And I want to make sure that for our listeners, when we say that, we mean numerically, right? We don't actually mean that we're lesser than when you think about underrepresented groups or Black people or brown people. It just numerically, it's more in these spaces, that we're navigating sometimes, whether it's in corporate America or into the medical field. It's just more of them, more white people in these areas. So as we're kind of discussing and navigating, can you think about, as we're thinking about life, as you were entering the workforce, maybe it was corporate America, what was life for you like in that moment? Maybe it's preconceived notions or the day-to-day life. What was it like for you entering the workforce initially?
Wow, great question. To put it bluntly, I wasn't clear about a lot of things. I was scared of my own shadow. I graduated from a college on Saturday and got a job on Tuesday at a hotel down in New Orleans, right? Being in human resources. And I was exhausted from undergraduate. I was flat broke, and all I wanted to do was work and make money and get a car. And I was able to start doing that. But where I was at in my life and in my career was I wanted to please, right? I was coming to terms with the fact that I was a gay man. I'm Black, and I was raised in an evangelical world. You could say the Bible Belt, right? And so I was wanting to do the right thing and wanting to may have some success. I can't even say that I walked out of school with a clear plan for that. I didn't, right? So that's why I said I wasn't clear, but I was scared of my own shadow. So if I talk different, so I was in a place of wanting to please, right? People pleasing, let's do the right thing, or whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Some circles we might say became a yes man. It was yes, sir, boss, no, sir, boss, right? And and in some ways that served me for some years, but I lost myself in that, right? But that's where I was when I first got out of school. And everything, some of the preconceived notions that I had of was I had always had my guard up, right? Because I had learned these things in college as well, going into dominant cultural spaces in the United States, especially where I was at. I was usually the only person of color in a certain role. And I was the weight of, I was scared, right? My mom would tell me things like, don't do this because they'll fire you for that. Or if they see you, you couldn't relax and have a good time with another coworker if you saw them, especially if they were a person of color, that you would be accused of not being performing.
Right.
All these things were happening. So I made sure that I was on the straight and narrow and scared to talk to other people and scared to laugh and have a good time. But I was, again, in a people pleasing phase and really didn't have a plan of action. And I had to, it took some years. Maybe that's actually life, but it took some years to come up with a definite plan. So that's who I was. But having fun. I was down in New Orleans and I did get a car and I would leave work and go hang out with friends. And there was a lot, and argue with my mom about, how much money I was spending. So life was life at the time.
Yes, I love that. And even the notion or thoughts about the words from your mom, because I think a lot of the things that, I also learned entering the workforce, came from what my mom would tell me as well, like, don't be congregating, you get there and you do your job, you get on time,
Yes.
don't be in big circles because, they think you up to no good. So, also code switching. It was so funny when I started doing that because it was just a part of life. Because I went to, a PWI in college. I also went to dominant white elementary, middle school, high school, so those were opportunities where, I felt like I would also pick up from, my friends that were mixed groups,
Mm-hmm.
and when it was going into the workplace, it felt like there was this certain way that I had to carry myself, so
Mm-hmm.
that I can be accepted into those circles that many times since elementary school, I was the first. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a time, Rashib, where I used to wear that as a badge of honor, being the
Mm-hmm.
first in these spaces, to the point that I felt like it was a detriment. So even
Mm-hmm.
now that I've become older, I've recognized that being the first is not a accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's an assignment.
Right.
How are you bringing others up? And as I've done this work on myself and learned more about this space, it kind of showed me that I shouldn't be the first, or and if I am the first, I better not be the last,
Mm-hmm.
in these spaces. So we
Absolutely.
had the great opportunity when I first moved to New York of working and collaborating together. And,
Right.
you were someone that I looked to as it relates to, oh my gosh, this is a Black man that's able to be himself. And he's in a leadership role and he's respected. And I don't know if I've told you this fully, but I'm saying it. And I think I have, because I said it privately, I think in many ways, but publicly, I've looked up to you in many ways and have always valued the time that we've been able to connect. And I've been able to glean from your, I would say, insight. Because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there are some Rashibisms out there that just always comes in my mind that, about navigating some of these spaces. Because for me, I feel as though for some people, they may have got out of college and went straight into corporate. I felt like when I moved to New York, I had to start bumping and hustling and hitting the ground running and show and prove. And I did a lot of experiential moves versus having promotions when I first started out, so
Mm-hmm.
I had to do a lot of networking and connecting and showing I can do this, but it was those connections that were really helpful to me of meeting you and connecting in.
Well, you're welcome. And yes, you've said that so many times privately, and I appreciate that. And it's something you said that, you said, here's a Black man in his own skin, or a Black leader who's able to be himself, that you perceive that wasn't the case very early on. I mean, I think by the time we met, I was still in discovery around who I was and what that meant. And although I had some chips or rings on my fingers from having some success and working in a corporate space, it was still under the guise of put your head down, shut up, and do as you're told. And I think about some messaging I received entering the workforce, or just some of those types of things, was um, to be appropriate and not to draw attention to myself, right? And that meant act, walk, talk, and dress like the dominant culture. Now, you saying, well, that's not the Rashib I met. I still came out, right? I still was myself, but there was a level of, I was trying to get it right, and I wasn't exploring what was actually true and authentic for me, right? And so the Rashib you see today, taking all of those life lessons, I actually am applying everything and being the only person I can be is me, right? And I'm clear, like, if I was looking to work with a company, if we don't, if there's not a fit, there's not a fit. Pre this, or pre some years, if there was no fit, I would have tried to make it fit, because that's how I was raised, right? Make it fit. And so it's been a journey, and thank you for look, there are no coincidences. I believe that the Holy Spirit has a highly individualized curriculum for each of us. And the fact that we're still in each other's life after all these years, we do the same work, right? But that's a testament to what God had planned for us and the universe had planned for us.
Come on now. Come on, Holy Spirit.
Come on.
Yes. And speaking of that, being both from the South and navigating, we're from Louisiana, right?
That boot.
Come on, the boot, I was about to shout out to the Saints, because I heard you went over to London and they end up losing, but we ain't gonna talk.
But I won because it was a good time. Yes, it was a good time.
Life, the quality of life. And that's what it's about, making those experiences. How do you think, with our Christian roots, how do you think mental health and our prayers align, or how do they differ, as it relates to us navigating this space, and also recognizing that the same God that created us also created the medical professionals? Like, how do you think there's alignment there?
I love this question. Thank you for this, is because on my journey, through my own mental health, through transformation work that I now train and do as a professional coach. But what I've learned is that, oh my gosh, the universal messages have been the same all along the way. And here's what I say, James, especially when I'm in the rooms training, I talk about growing up, the Bible's beat over my head. And I'm one of those kids, baby, we went to church twice on Sunday, went to Bible study on Wednesday. And if there was a revival tent somewhere to be found, we pulled up at it.
Come on now. You was at Vacation Bible School too?
And Vacation Bible School. That was some good summer. That was a good week of our lives, right?
Come on.
You know what I always tell people? And I said, what happened? I said, was it just me? My mom used to leave a pot of beans or leave something on the stove on Sundays, like on the low setting. And then we would go to church, and then she would always tell people, oh, I got to go at the end if they were talking or fellowshipping or visiting after the service. She said, oh, I got to go. I got something on the stove. We did that every week of our lives. And then it just dawned on me, do people leave stuff on the stove now? Right.
I think they use them crock pots, huh?
They use the crock pots, but we used to have beans. And then by the time you get home, you were hungry, right? And the food was ready. So with that said, I tell people, especially me trying to figure out my sexuality and all of those things, I actually, I didn't know. I tell people, and also some of the people I was raised around, I don't know I would necessarily know God's love by meeting them, because everything about them was legalistic and bondage, right? And everybody was going to burn in hell for everything. And then as I've gotten older and I've done my own work, transformation work, therapeutic work, as I've done my own work, I realized, oh my goodness, a lot of the messaging that I had received as a child through scriptures, through sitting in churches and religious settings, were actually some of the same things that the motivational speaker that I love is saying, right? Or some of the things that the processes that a therapist would help me go through, or a coach would help me go through, by unpacking where did that come from, right? And then also getting clear on what actions that I want to take for me, right? And one of my favorite things is, one of my favorite scriptures from the Bible now that I always say in my sessions is, it's from the New Testament, or you might say the Greek scriptures for some people, but it's Ephesians 3:20. And it says, now unto him who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that worketh within us. So you can only be blessed according to your faith. So if you don't want to pick up the phone and call the mental health professional, then God can't make moves. God is waiting on you, or the universe is.
The people got to walk around the room now. They got to run. That was a run.
Let me pull out my tambourine and run around the sanctuary.
Yes. Give us that scripture one more time.
Absolutely. It's Ephesians 3:20. It's from the New Testament or the Greek scriptures. And it says, now unto him who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we could ask or think. Hear that. I can blow your mind. I can blow your mind. You won't be able to stand it. It'll be so good. But now unto him who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all you could ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. So if we move, the universe moves, or God moves. If we're resistant, then God is saying, or the universe is saying, hey, I'm waiting on you. And those times where I've had doors open, and is when I've been willing to apply the work, or when I've been willing to be vulnerable, or risk, or trust. And when now I can look back at how I was raised, and for many years I rejected, like saying, well, I don't like how I was raised. I was a Christian, and I do believe in the word of God, or how I was raised, but I didn't like how I was raised. I do believe in the word of God, and I have applied it to my life. And so now I can now look back with this new level of learning, by learning non-traditional or non-religious things, to say, oh, they're all saying the same thing.
Correct.
And the beautiful thing is it all starts with me. If it's to be, it's up to me. That's a common theme that they have. That's what that scripture, Ephesians 3:20 says. God says, I can do it, but according to the power that works in you.
Yes. And I love that, the power that works in you, because that's also digs into faith without works is dead. You can have, if you don't have the faith, you can have the faith, but if you don't have the works, then it cannot come to pass, and my acronym for faith is for all I trust him. So I have to trust him for all things and know that he can do exceedingly abundantly above all I can ask or think. But if I'm not working, if I'm not a willing vessel, then what is there to do? How can he?
So how can he move? Absolutely. And one thing that I say, two things. I call people sometimes like that information junkies. So they can get all the information. They sitting up there reading it, but they're not acting on it. So faith without works is dead. So you got to be in action around it. And here's something that my mentor told me, and I say this all the time: people believe in God, but they don't believe God. They believe in God, but they don't believe God. So I believe there is a God. Oh, I sit in church Sunday after Sunday, but when the word is saying, go for it, do it, try me, call me in remembrance. Oh, you don't believe God, because God said I can do it. So like you said, faith, and for all things I trust in him. He's saying, trust in me. But you, oh no, you just wanted to sit and be performative at church, shouting and run around the sanctuary, when he's actually asking you to now seek mental health, or request that promotion, or do you sitting in the back mumbling and jumbling, but yet you sitting in church Sunday after Sunday. So I'll say that one more time. We believe in God, but we don't believe God.
Yes. Mic drop. Because what good is it to serve a God that you won't allow to be God in your life?
Come on.
Why? Like he wants to be there. He's our protector. He's the beginning and the end. He wants to do exceedingly abundantly above all. but we have to release the reins. And too many times I feel as though we have our hands on it. We have our hands on it, like he's trying to mold us and we all got our hands in it, or we're saying, not right now, I want to do it in a little, if God is going to be God, it's not going to be on our timetable. He has to reign. He has to reign. So that is so good. That's so rich. And thinking of that, letting God be God and mental health, what are some ways you are putting your mental health first? Because if we're going to believe God, what are some ways that you have been believing God as it relates to your mental health?
I love the way you said that. If we're going to believe God, and one of the ways I do is it's a be, do, have conversation. And so I check in on my being. And the way I do that is starting my day with setting my intentions. What do I want to create today? Who do I get to be today? How many people am I going to love on today? Right. I also have some quiet time in the morning for myself. So in that conversation of setting my intentions, I'm also taking time out to read. I'm also praying or speaking health, wealth, and wellness over my life and throughout the day. And anyone I come in contact with. And you know what I've learned, James? I've learned that we're always one action, we're always one choice, we're always one belief, and one conversation away from our best life. So I forget the scripture, but it talks about just words have power, or guarding your mind or whatnot. That comes through also if I'm speaking health and wellness over my life. I'm actually speaking, I was doing my workout and I say, when I do my exercise, I say I'm worth it, right? Am I in a conversation of, I'm always present to what am I saying, not just to you, but to myself. Am I in a conversation of I can, or am I in a conversation of I can't, right? Am I a conversation of possibility or no possibility? Am I in a conversation? When I say conversation, I mean interactions with most importantly, self-talk, right? But when I'm being also with people, am I in a conversation that's loving, or am I in a conversation that's not loving, right? And so we're always one action, we're one choice, we're one belief, and we're one conversation away from our best life. And so as I think about my mental health these days, it's always being present to that, right? And also being vulnerable and human to experience my experience. I have days where I'm funky. I have days where it was a bad day, and I give myself permission to let that energy come up. And I also am willing to look at it and then make some choices around it moving forward. So it starts with me by setting my intentions.
Yes, thank you for that. Setting intentions. And I think with that intentionality, for me, years ago, I was someone that I would roll out of bed when it was exactly time to be at work or be somewhere. And I was tardy for the party, many times than not. But once I got there, you knew that the job was going to get done. And I would rely on that because, I'm someone, I will stay to the end. I will stay later because I am a later riser, because I feel like my creativity happens later in the day. But one of the things that was a game changer for me was understanding that success is based upon my preparation. I have to be prepared for that, and when I was not showing up prepared as my best self, I was not giving my fullness of that. And when I had that shift in thought mindset, things started to change for me as it relates. And to me, it was that intentionality. I was being more intentional about how did I want to greet the day? What did I want that day to look like? And so even now, in moments where it feels like we are navigating even hybrid modes, or, the past 2 years, we've been in different spaces, but having to get back to that intentionality as it relates to how do I want to greet the day so that I can make sure that I am giving my best self to this day.
Can I jump in and say,
For sure.
I love what you said around that, and preparation is part of my success. And one of my coaches, I'll shout her out, her name is Sylvia High. Sylvia said, she gave me an example a couple of years ago around how someone in her life prepared for big. And so that's what Sylvia would say, prepare for big. And preparing for big doesn't mean Madison Square Garden, but if the people are coming to your house, or say you're setting up your meeting room for training, what's the attention to detail, the love that you pour in, whatever. It can be, people can feel it when you walk into the space. They can feel the energy that you prepared. Even the example that Sylvia gave me was someone she was working with. When she would set up the room, the training room, it was simply chairs in the training room, flip charts at the front of the room. But she would also go the step further to wipe down the walls. She would wipe baseboards, stuff that was not her job, but she just prepared for big, right? And so
Ooh.
when you walked in the room, you felt like the room was refreshed and it was just something going on, but that was because energetically she prepared for big. So even if it's like us getting to work or setting up for the next day, the times I know I'm about to kick some butt with some trainings is when I set my clothes out the night before,
Come on
right?
now.
Right? Set
You
the
gotta
clothes.
see yourself in it.
I see myself and I said, baby, this is the power. These are the power pieces. And I'm going to, we're getting ready, some transformation, and we're going to break some yokes down and coming down to strongholds in this training. Right.
Come on now.
And so that's what I remind myself, not in the preparation and setting the intention, is to prepare for big, right? This might be it. I might be sitting on the subway or going to wherever I'm going, and someone says, I love your outfit. I'm making it about the outfit, but going back to the training room, they're going to feel the energy when they walk into the room, and they won't know what it is, but I'll know what it is. Last thing I'll say is I actually was doing I'm leading a group, a cohort, a leadership cohort that we just started this weekend, and there were 25 participants. One
Awesome.
of the participants came up to me afterward and asked me, had I done anything to set the room up energetically because something dynamic was happening in the room.
Mm.
And he didn't know, but yes, we set our intentions as a coaching team. As I'm the lead coach, we set our intentions. We started sourcing and generating breakthrough, clarity, healing, forgiveness before we even walked into the room, right? And then even when we got to the room, the setup of the room, the love was in the details, just touches, music playing, all of the things that I enjoy and make it comfortable for me as a trainer. We prepared for big. We set our intentions big.
Yes. Oh, that was good. And shout out to Sylvia High. I've taken one of her classes on IM before, and it was transformational. And it just all reminds me when I think of these principles or action mindsets, reminds me of, I can go back to the church because
Right.
it takes me back to setting the atmosphere. If you are
Yes.
expecting a word from God or to have yokes broken and to be set free, you have to
Mm-hmm.
come there ready to receive. You know, I remember the
Mm-hmm.
elders being there early in the morning. They had been
Mm-hmm.
praying in the sanctuary before you
Come
even
on.
got there.
Come on.
You know, so if we are setting the atmosphere in our workplaces, in our families, in our homes, you have to be, you gotta get there before. You gotta be there. You gotta be present. So I love that intentionality is important.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great reminder. And being that
Amen.
yeah, go ahead. Did you have
No,
something to add?
and our elders setting the room, so we had no choice but to release whatever because it was already prepared. And our elders, some of them got more work done, or they got better results out of their relationship with God than we did. And now we got the Bible on our app.
Come
But
on now.
they were right, preparing the space and atmosphere early on. So just thank you for that.
I was telling my god sister the other day, I was at church and I said, you know what? I'm about to go find my Bible leaves because I need to turn these pages again. I need to start back
Yes.
highlighting because, I've been so accustomed, we all have, of opening that app up and doing what we need to do in there. But it was something that hit me in the sanctuary the other day. I was like, let me go find my Bible. And get into
Mm-hmm.
these leaves and note taking again, because now I just do it all on my phone. I was like, am I missing something? Because sometimes I'm paying attention, but if a text come across, I'm also missing something that could be, very pertinent to the promises. So yeah,
Amen.
being that we are having to, God didn't make any one trick ponies. We can do
Mm-hmm.
this and we can do that. We can be about that life, right? And when we think corporately about being about that life, what are some ways or suggestions, I would say, that you have for someone that's navigating corporate spaces as an underrepresented person? or a member of an underrepresented group, whether it be Black or brown, Asian, anyone that's numerically underrepresented, because there are many stressors, I would say, when it comes to these corporate spaces that may not have been intended for us to be there when they were initially thought of, when people were set into these roles, but we have come to disrupt. And we're in these spaces because we belong. We're in these spaces because we're qualified, right? But what are some of those suggestions that you may have for someone that's navigating through blatant microaggressions and biases?
Yeah, great question, because we know it's happening right now as we speak, right? First, I want to acknowledge any professional that is in these spaces, right? Because they're not imagining things. Although we're told we're imagining things, right? We know that it's happening. And systemic oppression would ask us to prove it. And sometimes we can't prove it, but we know how it feels, right? Systemic oppression would have us disconnect from our source and our body to say we're not feeling what we're feeling, but a liberatory practice is actually connecting to this doesn't feel right. And so you're not imagining it. And I want to acknowledge you for that. I think what comes up for me as I think of how they are navigating spaces is a couple things. One is finding out what's authentic for them, right? Why do I say that? Because so many years, James, it took me before I got clear on what was happening to me. I mean, I was bombarded with microaggressions. I was bombarded with all kinds of stressors. At the same time, I didn't know who I was because of all of the way I was raised, the issues going on in society. So I had no idea what was authentic to me. Sometimes I worked at places that I had no desire to be with because I didn't like the culture, but I didn't know how to say, this is not a fit, right? Now I know how to say that. Absolutely. I won't take a job or I won't sign on with a client. If it's not a fit, it's not a fit. But so it took me many years to build my muscle around that. So that's what I offer to your listeners, is that work on what's authentic for them, right? And find out who they are authentically. The second thing that I think what comes up for me as they're navigating these corporate spaces is, utilize the systems that are in place. If there's complaint reporting, if there's a way to make suggestions, if there's a way to do that, or to have skip level meetings, all of those things, utilize all of the things that are available to you. That's one thing I learned as being part of an underrepresented group at times, is that it's not that there wasn't a system in place. I just wasn't utilizing the system, right? We say in church, the word works if you work it. Well, if the system works if you work it.
That's true. But can I add in for sometimes, when you are the only in these spaces, you have a fear of retaliation. How do you combat that? Because what you're thinking is, I know I need to say something about this because it's not right. It doesn't feel right. But you're afraid because, this is the only job. This is your shot at it, but it's not landing the way that it should. And you're afraid to maybe speak out.
You bring up a good point. I always tell people to use their best judgment. And something that my mother told me, and I use this every day, is live to tell about another day. Sometimes like you said, you should not be the first, but it is your assignment, right? Something you said to that nature. Yeah. So your assignment may need to be there. And so do the old saying of pick your battles. There is truth to that. Some days this isn't worth the fight. Other days you want to fight, right? And so retaliation is a real thing. Before you agitate, here's what I've learned. Before you agitate, you want to make sure you have a base, right? Because sometimes we agitate, or we make a report, and maybe if there are witnesses or whatnot, sometimes if those people aren't going to back you up, then it is not safe for you to make the report at that time, because people they'll leave you on the lurch, right? But at the same time, so when you start bringing issues up, and as you talk to people and meet with them and find out where they are with that, if they're not going to be as vocal as you might be going it alone. So you might want to re-strategize around that, right? The other thing that I want to offer your listeners is also, success is not separate from who you are. I believe that you have a big life, right? And so work is just one part of our life. So continue to invest in your neighborhood, or I mean your network, and your friends, your community, people that love on you. As much as you're pouring out into that job, allow yourself to pour into your friends and be poured into, because that you go home and you work, you're usually off on the weekends, or your Zoom is off, right, or your Microsoft Teams is off. So really look at who your network is and your family is, right? And friends, and that's important. A lot of my friends and family sustained me in those relationships because it was the love I needed that I wasn't getting at work, right? Last thing I'll say around that is also look at why are you at the job? What's your belief about it? What's your belief about having this position, having this title? You know what, James, many years that I was in human resources, I was attached to that it was respectable. I was attached to that it was a 9 to 5, and they paid me very well, many over and over.
Come on
And
now.
so I was beholden to all of that, because it also, my mom could go tell people who I was, because it looked good and sounded good. And so that was running the show. And so I had to look at who am I without it. And took some years, but that's when I was able to step into consulting. But it I didn't realize how strong of a grip that had on me, right? And not even in dominant culture spaces, but even in my own social circles. Like, what's the first question people ask you? What do you do? Right. And so I didn't know how to navigate my own identity outside being attached to some employer. And so find out what's authentic for them, build a base inside the job, right? As far as use the systems that work, but build a base. So you're not agitating alone. When you do agitate, that's grassroots organizing. And then finally, look at the underlying assumptions of belief you have about that job, that title, that position, and what does that mean to you? And that may reveal your next moves.
All right, we're going to school now. I hope you have your notebooks out, because he is taking us to school. Yes, 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 yes. And something that stood out to me is the reminder, as I am also navigating corporate spaces and relationships, is that this is a marathon.
Yes.
It's not a sprint, so there's some days where you have to rest. There's some other days where you're hard at work, but there has to be balance in this work, and a career coach, an executive career coach, said to me as well, was that every house is not a home. You have to know when it's time for an exit as well. When you're not being treated fairly, when it doesn't sit right with you, and you know that you've done all that you can. So on the flip side of that, as we're thinking about from the professional standpoint we just talked about, but from a company that wants to do, because you may have some leaders that are listening in and saying, how can I be impactful to my team or impact the culture of my company? What can organizations do as we're thinking about mental health? And we're thinking about so many that I say this every time I get a chance, our platform, is that we are currently still in a pandemic. As much as we like to say that this is post-COVID, COVID is still very much present, and people are taking time off. People are still dying, not as frequently as it was before, but there's still some long COVID and health issues that are happening. And we may not get the results of the past 2 years until we're down the road of what the effects have been on all of us that were at home watching social unrest, watching the death of George Floyd, put an attack on Black lives. And there's a lot that we're harboring. So as someone that is trying to impact culture, what can organizations do to build a healthy culture?
Thank you for this question, and thank you for those comments. Just what you said, one of the things that first comes up when I think about promoting a healthy work culture is talking about the elephant in the room. Like, I think a lot of companies, it took George Floyd's death and it took the protests of 2020 for town halls to be had and us to have conversations that some of us, or minoritized people or underrepresented groups, are having conversations every day, but yet they could not have those conversations at work because it became, oh, you can't talk about that at work. Well, we're human beings, not human doings. We want to give space for people to talk about it, right? We see 8 Asian women being shot and killed in Georgia in a salon, or a spa. that people just don't turn that off. You walked into work and you hear that horrific story, or the Uvalde school shootings, right? People, you got to talk about that. And I know people have what is that called? Employee assistance hotlines. You know, yes, employers and employees should utilize that, but at the same time, we want to be able to create spaces where we could just talk about it, right? If you're all sitting in the office, we're all on the Zoom, we're all um, sitting at the water cooler, standing at the water cooler, and don't pretend. You can't pretend it's not happening. And so once you start having that conversation, now what I've learned in my work is that people, underrepresented groups, are more willing to have um, real conversations. They're willing to have hard conversations about the elephant in the room, especially as Black people. We'll have the conversation about what's happening to us or what's going on with the intention of looking for a solution. Oftentimes my experience has been, let me speak from my experience. My experience is when we engage in this conversation with white people or dominant culture, the stereotypically with the fragility shows up, the tears show up, the fear of having the conversation. We're all in this. We want a better world. It's going to take all of us to form a more perfect union. So let's have this conversation so we can get to the other side of it. But if you keep avoiding the conversation and the elephant in the room, we're not going to get to the other side of it. So that's one piece for me that I say, talk about the elephant in the room. Because we're talking about it when we go home, and we're talking about it with our friends, and that's healthy. The other piece I'd like to say is what's healthy for me and what I offer companies is that people learn about their own culture and then share their learning with others. And I say that, James, as a person who does D&I learning, and like you, is sometimes the dynamics is people want to learn about other people and as if they're a voyeur in their lives, right? And I think the meat or the reward is learning about your own culture and how that's been through history, and then sharing your learning, right? Typically what happens is, if let's say we're in a US dynamic and there are people of color, Black, Asian, Latinx, and then there are white people, the people of color will typically want to share about their culture, and the white Americans will say, I'm just white. And then the conversation sort of fizzles because we all want to learn about each other, but we need you to tell us about you, right? And not have we want you to write your own story and write your own narrative and not have someone else do it. And so that's what I think will promote healthy work cultures. Last thing I'll say is also continue to utilize all the systems that are in place. If there's an engagement activity, it might be an opportunity to show face or to be seen or to understand what some people are doing. You know what, James, a lot of times in work, I was upset that someone else had a promotion. I was upset that someone else had was placed on a committee. It wasn't because there was favoritism. It's just that they took the time out to get to know the people, the decision makers, and build those relationships, right? And so that's what I offer people, is to take time out to build relationships. I know it's from the employer standpoint, as far as talk about the elephant in the room, right? And make it so that when your people are doing their trainings, that they're talking about their culture and not someone else's, so they're not voyeurs. But then also for employees or team members, take time to invest in relationships. Everyone needs to do it, because that's how you going to the volunteer activity for work, or you showing up to the fireside chat. People see your face, and that happens at the church function, that happens in the community. You think just because white people are involved or someone else is involved that it doesn't work the same. It does work the same. You know, building relationships. People do business with people they're familiar with, and so that's what uh, that's something that I offer employees, and employers get to do a better job of that as well.
Yes, so many gems that you just dropped on us, and if I had a bomb, it'd be boom right there with all those gems, because it's a reminder that relationships are key. They're
Mm-hmm.
important. When you're saying no, know what you're saying no to. When you don't want to go to the after work event or that volunteer opportunity, because that's where those relationships are fostered, as you talked about. Many of my roles, and I've had two created for me, have come for building relationships, because
Mm-hmm.
yes, I believe that I am great. I know that I can do it. And many of my listeners know that they're amazing because your parents, you have been taught this from birth, that you
Mm-hmm.
can do anything that you put your mind to, but you have to go out there and make witnesses,
Yes.
and if no one else can be a witness to your greatness, then you don't have people in the room to actually say, hey, have you thought about Rashib? Have you thought about James? Have
Mm-hmm.
you considered this person? And you want to make sure that you're at the front of mind as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
as
Absolutely.
often.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So as we move to personally, especially to your book, because I think everything that we've been talking about, is about that life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
mental health, your wellness, showing up as your authentic self, understanding who you are and whose you are makes you about that life. So when I think about your book, About That Life, Leadership Lessons for the Urban Professional, what was true when you wrote this book that is still true today?
You know what? I thank you for that question. And when I was thinking about this question, here's what came up for me. And I'm a bottom line it. Leadership doesn't need titles. I don't need permission to be who I've been called to be, right? The ego and the younger self, when I years ago, probably even when I wrote the book, didn't know that. The world has world and people have peopled and life has life for me to where it revealed to me that I don't need permission to be who I've been called to be, right? And so at many times I was looking for the title to validate who I was called to be. But when the title didn't come and I still had the fire and still had the passion to do what I've been called to do, and I just started doing it, and I realized I was getting the results that I wanted because I just started doing it. The bottom line, leadership doesn't need titles. I don't need permission to be who I've been called to be. So that's what I offer to your listeners.
Ooh, yes. Leadership doesn't need titles. I love that. I love that. And I know that this book was influenced by many elders
Mm-hmm.
in your walk, your journey, this movement work. What's something that an elder has told you that still sits with you today? What's one of
Hmm.
those things that they've told you that you like, it's tucked right here. You got to keep one tucked. What's one you have?
You know, what first comes to mind as you said that to me, ask me that is, I'll go back to Sylvia High. She said, who's been a great mentor and coach over the years. She said, your vision will always tell you what to do or who to be, and then tell you what to do. And so anytime I'm faltering or anytime I'm not sure, I check back in on the vision, right? What's the vision? And what from the word says, write the vision down and make it plain. And in
Make it
time
plain.
it will come to pass and it shall tarry not, right? And so I checking in with the vision, that's something that uh, an elder has said to me, and I carry that every day, right? If I think of something else, I'll let you know.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so in line because anytime I work under or beside a leader, one of the first things I ask them when we go into a planning session or opportunity to connect, even if it's informal, is what's your vision? Because if
Hmm.
I can't subscribe to the vision that you have, I can't work alongside it. I want to be able to be pulled in, drawn in, because when it gets tough, the vision is going to keep me because I know what we're working towards. I know that this moment is simply a moment because what we're trying to get to is this vision. We're trying to make sure that this happens. So that's one of the things I always ask. And I think it's awesome to always have that for yourself personally, because it's what is going to keep you in check as you navigate your journey, because it's easy to waver.
And one more thing, it's in the book. I think I referenced one of my early directors of human resources, a gentleman named Ray Bruce, who's still in New Orleans, doing a great job. And he was a great mentor. But he told me, he said, say yes or raise your hand for things. So when we talked about joining committees or going to the after work event. He was a great catalyst early on, just telling me to raise my hand, raise my hand. I've refined and defined that over the years, just like you talking about some rest is the new success. That's what I say.
Come
so
on.
Sometimes I needed to place a border or a boundary around that. But there have been times where I realized that there was value in saying yes. And even that's shown up for me as a consultant, like, I'm a yes. I'm in possibility. Let's be a yes. Let's figure this out. And sometimes we get to the end of us being in the yes and realize this may not work at this time. That's okay. But I was a yes. I let the world tell me no before I told me no. I'm a yes, right? And so that's what Ray Bruce taught me in a small way, but I've been able to enhance it. And so I put that in the book as well.
Yes.
Yes.
RT. Yes. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, I have a 60-second, first mind lightning round that I want to go through. So I'm going to say something. You have to tell me in a sentence or less, the first thing that comes to your mind or a phrase. I even give you a second sentence if you want to add a conjunction onto that. So are you down to play this?
I'm down. Let's do it.
All right, let's go into it. So first thing I'm going to give you into this lightning round, I'm just going to blurt them out there and you just roll with it. DEI.
Diversity for some numbers, equity for how we're treating each other, and inclusion, right? There's many ways to do it, but what I believe, I was supposed to say one sentence, but I'm just keep going. But what I believe is it's equity first, inclusion, starting with your people that you already have in there, and then you get to the equity and the diversity. Last thing I'll say about that is, here's the thing. DEI is beautiful and wonderful. I want to know, as your company, what action are you taking in the community? Because we need to see what you're doing internally. It needs to be visible externally, because that's the way we're going to change our systems. We need you to be a stand for the change in the systems.
Boom. And I will tell you, Rashib does not know what I'm going to ask him. So this is off the cuff. Thank you so much. Next word. Imposter syndrome.
You know what? Here's what I tell people. Put your chips down on paper, write it down. Look, if you stop and take an audit of your life, you are more successful than you're giving yourself credit. And guess what? Not only do you not need permission to be who you've been called to be, but you can go into any room, right? You don't need qualifications. If we look at some of our political leaders and whatnot who are unqualified, hello, somebody, you don't need qualifications. Guess what? The qualifications will show up. How about you stop trying to be somebody else, and how about you start being yourself and watch the world show up? The biggest shock of my life has been that the world was waiting on me to show up as myself the entire time. Ooh. And so that's what I offer you to combat that imposter syndrome.
All right, can we do two more?
Yes.
All right, Kanye West.
Public health emergency, public mental health breakdown that we're watching, and that's my interpretation. And any attention that's paid to that will, based on the way our systems are set up and based on capitalism, then we may be earning more money by us paying attention to tomfoolery. It's actually very sad and it's hurtful. I think it's sad that I think he's having a mental health crisis publicly. That's what I think, but I'm not a licensed mental health therapist.
Allyship.
You know what? Do your work. Don't come to me and tell me, you can't come to me and say you want to be my ally. Let me observe you, or let those people observe you doing your work on yourself and speaking to people in your community that they then want to work with you and ally with you because they see you and they're impressed by your work. But if anything else, if you say, oh, I want to be your ally, and you join a committee, it's performative, boo. And the people gonna see straight through it. So how to be the best ally is to do your work internally, your identity, all of the things that make you, and deal with your community. And then people will want to work with you because they're impressed by the work that you're doing on you, with you, and with your people.
yes, yes. I know I said only two. My last one is favorite song and why.
Hmm. I'm jamming it. I would say "No Ordinary Love" by Sade. Is yeah, we took it back to the '90s. But lately, I'm jamming a song that called "I Was Created for This" by Tweet, and I was created for this. So many times I tried to run away, and but there was no way of hiding. Right? That's what she's saying. I think it has spiritual undertones to it, but I was created for this. Right? The things that I'm doing, even though I may be faltering or maybe imposter syndrome tried to show up, I was created for this, and I'm going to walk in this, and I'm going to have faith. I'm going to I'm going to trust in him and lean not into mine own understanding, but acknowledge him in all thy ways, right? And so I was created for this by Tweet.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for playing this game.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the gems that you have dropped, because one of the things that I recognize is that your intelligence, your wisdom, none of it is free, but you have freely given it to us on today and to me throughout the years. Thank you for your mentorship and your leadership and being on the Butterfly Chamber. And you're part of the family. You always have been. And I love you so much for being who you are and just showing up and leading the ways that you do.
Thank you so very much. And you're doing the same exact game recognizes game. So you're out there making moves, and I'm impressed by you and grateful that, knowing that the work that you're doing in the community that you built, there's so many things, there's so many topics that are in good hands and so many people that are in good hands. So I'm honored to have been here on the Butterfly Effect and honored to have your listeners listen. And anybody that wants to find me, I know I'm on Instagram or even on LinkedIn at Rashib, and would love for them to follow me.
Yes, yes, yes. And anything else that you want to share with the listeners before you roll out? Because I know you got some things planned for the evening, so it is time.
Well, they can find me on Instagram. I'm so grateful if they want an autographed copy of my book, Bout That Life, Leadership Lessons for the Urban Professional. When they go to the Instagram, the link tree will be there. So that's Linktree Rashib, Rahshib. And they can not only do that, purchase a book, but there's so many other things. They can download a racial equity blueprint that'll help their organization or help facilitate a conversation, but they can also connect with me if they'd like for a 20-minute discovery call where we can talk about either one-on-one coaching or possibly D&I consulting. So I'm available. Hit me up on Instagram, Linktree at Rashib, and we'll go from there.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Support. And your support also, doesn't just look like words, it looks like finances as well. So please tap in, get Bout That Life. And again, thank you for being on the Butterfly Chamber today. Thank you for listening in. Tell a friend to join us on the porch, because we are learning, we are listening, we're sharing, we're laughing. But one of the things that we are not proclaiming is that we're experts. We are learning together in this space. So as we're learning, grow with us. And as you grow with us, know that God will do exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or think. Bless you all and talk to you soon. Peace.
And I was created for this. Ooh, I was created for this.
Butterfly Chamber with JR.